So, welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence podcast and interview series. I'm so excited to have Jamie Valenti-Jordan with me today. I was lucky enough to meet him a few weeks ago, just doing I think one of our outreach campaigns we were doing for my company, Levy. You responded because you were curious about what we were up to. We ended up on this sort of deep dive just about business, what it meant to be a small business owner, running your own business, all this other stuff. I'm like, oh my God, like Jamie's so thoughtful about all these different things that go into building a business. And then as I've done more research about your background and what you've done, and frankly, all the time you spent at bigger companies, which I'm guessing probably led you to thinking deeply about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur and hopefully a good entrepreneur and run a business the right way, really led me to want to have you on the show today. I found you so fascinating. And I think your story will hopefully resonate with a lot of people because it's different than most. A lot of people I know and talk to are more in the tech space. Mm-hmm. And the truth is not everybody at all. In fact, the large majority of amazing, excellent entrepreneurs are not in the quote unquote sort of tech venture capital space and are doing so much else. And that made me want to talk with you, Jamie. So I'll hand it over to you really quickly. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, mm-hmm. who you are, what you do, Catapult Services, all that stuff. And then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So just to kind of, since you alluded to it briefly, yes, I fell in love with the food industry actually with a couple of internships with General Mills during undergrad. I was at Georgia Tech in chemical engineering. So found the love of my life to the point that I turned down 6 figures with Exxon straight out of undergrad, went to go to Madison.
So wait, I almost have to pause you right there sorry, and I'm going to do this a bunch during their call, so I apologize. But like, wait, you said the love of your life. You didn't mean your wife or spouse. You meant the type of work you wanted to do. And you figured that out in college, you're saying?
Out in undergrad, yep.
Wow, lucky you. Yeah. Okay, how did you figure that? How did you even figure that out in school? You're just like, I love the food in the dining hall at Georgia Tech. What was it?
Even more fun than that is I had not taken an engineering course at all, but I ended up getting hired for a summer internship at a carpet mill, where I discovered I did not have a love for textiles. The vast majority of my research of our examples in class were all petrochemical or pharmaceutical in nature. Neither of those energized me, but the content did, the application. So I went and took a microelectronics fabrication course, where I found out I have no passion for that either. But I do have a cute little chip that I printed from my time there. And ended up getting an internship with General Mills through my chemistry professional fraternity. And that went well. So I went back for a second one, fell in love with the food industry, went back out of undergrad and went and got a master's in food science at Madison after that.
And what made you though, even, sorry, I keep going back to that, like the fact, it's not easy for someone who's 21 years old or something at that point to say no to a 6-figure job right out of college. Absolutely. And go say, I'm going to go do something different. Like that's what gave you think even the confidence to make that decision?
That's a very good question. Honestly, I saw no future for myself working in the petroleum industry. I knew I was decent at it. I knew I could get the job done. It seemed like it was going to crush my soul. Whereas food presented, this familial connection. It presented the opportunity to engage with my area of study in a way that allowed me to leverage the principles, but necessarily have to make a series of assumptions around the materials that I was working with. It wasn't clear. It wasn't straight up, the same materials all day long. You've got agricultural impacts and everything like that. So you have to be able to think on your feet in order to be able to make the product you are trying to make with the attributes you're trying to make it. And it just seemed really dynamic. There was never going to be 2 days in a row that looked exactly the same. Whereas petrochemical, you're going to spend 6 months studying something to maybe have something get out the door, maybe not. And you could spend 20 years and accomplish nothing. based on, interviews I did with people that were 5 years ahead of me, right? So that didn't seem like me. Me, I want to make an impact. I want to have a reason for doing things. I want to substantially change the human condition with my efforts. So, um,
I, I love that. I love that thesis. I think a lot of entrepreneurs share it, where they want to make an impact in various different ways. And just digging really another point that I found fascinating made, because I've talked to other people who said something similar, where they said, you know what, I took control of sort of my life and my career around that college timeframe when they did. I know someone else who did exactly what you just described, where she went and had conversations with alumni and other people in the network and said, like, what was your path? What did you enjoy? And so it sounds like you did that too. How many people did you talk to? How specific were you about who I'm going to go have conversations with and try to figure out, do I want to go down this petrochemical path?
Oh, probably all in all, about 250, 300 people.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I thought you were going to say like 25 people. That's incredible.
You call everybody you can get a hold of, right? LinkedIn was just starting off at that point. People were hopping on there of our age and slightly older, and it was a great opportunity to say, hey, I'm a Georgia Tech, soon to be alumnus. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do? And we had people that would come in to present as well. So every week in undergrad, we had some company that employed Georgia Tech graduates come back and present on what it was that they were doing. They bought us lunch. So I had a lunch every single week to sit around and learn about my career and my options in it. And yeah, there were some folks that got shipped off to southern Siberia, and there they would live for 2 years, and they get paid, but they literally have nothing to spend the money on. So they come back and they'd be rich. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not doing anything. Like, you're in the middle of nowhere. That's not life, right? That's subsistence. So, which is fine for certain people who want that, but it wasn't me, right?
And so, do you think, in a sense, you did? If you look at your colleagues who graduated at the same time and made decisions, do you think that yours? I mean, I'm sort of setting this up, I guess, in a way to say yes, but like, I'm not trying to. Which is, do you think that you took more control of your career early on, and that led you to a certainly different place? I don't know if it's better or worse, but because you said, I'm going to make a proactive decision. I'm going to do the research, make a proactive decision, and be the entrepreneur for my career, that led you in a very different direction, obviously, to where you are today, which we haven't even gotten anywhere close to yet. But did that change your trajectory if you talk to your colleagues when you go back to college reunion and things like that?
I mean, honestly, it happened long before that, before I even got to college, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone who's at Georgia Tech is super smart. Everyone who's there is already super smart. They're already driven, right? So you're already with this cohort of people who are driven, but yet you're still saying you were different, you think, than many.
Well, I was different, going back to my Eagle project, right? I didn't want something that was going to disappear in 5 years, right? Something that was going to be persistent and owned and maintained and things like that. So I chose an Eagle project associated with that rather than take the first 20 that were pitched to me. It took me like 9 months to pick an Eagle project because I knew what I was trying to do. I was looking at legacy at age 15, 16 already, right?
Wow.
Legacy is not the only measure and not even the best measure, but it's a measure that's important to me of what success and impact on the world is. So if I look at what am I going to be doing 60 years from now, and are people going to be talking about me, but are people going to be talking about what was done, right? Are they going to talk about how that was a pivotal moment in that particular area, and it helped make a change that was sustaining and valuable and built upon by others in the future? I don't need to have my name in lights. What I need to know is I changed the equation, right? So given that has been a driving focus for a lot of the efforts that I do, which in some cases, meant that I was sitting at a desk for 2 years because I had to earn my stripes, in some examples, right? But that's important because it empowered me to make ongoing decisions about the trajectory of my life because I was always focused on how I can make that impact. So, um, when you talk about how do we empower other entrepreneurs behind us, I'd say take that perspective. It doesn't need to be your only guiding perspective, but it needs to be one you weigh of, hey, if you would just want to start a company for 5 years and then sell, you need to have a destination for those funds to go if that's what you're
Yeah.
going to do, right? And you need to think about not only what are you going to do with those funds, but what are you going to do with what you do with those funds? Like, are you going to start a second company? Great. If you're just going to sell that one too, again, you need to put this money somewhere. You need to have a goal with it, not just accumulate money. Accumulate money is not a goal, it's a means to an end, right?
I totally agree. Although I think there's a lot of people who don't have that perspective, and maybe that's coming from a privileged perspective. You and I have done well enough. We have some level of creature comfort
Absolutely.
at this point in our lives,
Yep.
but at the same time, I do think it's really critical for people to think about like money is not the goal. Like once you get enough to support your general lifestyle, like look, it's not. I don't feel a need to go fly in private jets and do those things. So like maybe that's not something I need in my life, but I can afford my general life things today.
Mhm.
Uh, Once you get to that point, though, a lot of people, that's just the goal. But what you're saying essentially, that is a fair goal, but there's so much more out after that.
Yeah, I'm not going to judge other people's goals by any stretch of the
Of course.
imagination. I'm just going to explain what mine is and how I arrived at my driving force.
So walk me through then. So speaking about that, okay, you obviously started way early about I want to have a legacy, which is amazing, and I think I actually want to talk to you more about what that means for every entrepreneur, maybe if they're similar or not, but we'll get there. But then you graduate,
Mm-hmm.
you go to General Mills, and you basically work. I'm going to put this in a kind of bad way, so I apologize. Like you basically work a desk job for like 12 years. I mean, like working for sort of, I'll call it the man, but like working for a big company for a really long time. Like what was how did you kind of cool your jets given that drive and passion or sort of focus you had?
I think that's sweeping over a lot of stuff that was done.
I assume so. So walk me through
Yeah,
it.
sure.
Dig in there.
Sure. So, General Mills was the internship that put me on the path of getting a master's in food science. That was a specialization where I found that I had a unique gift in being able, not unique, but an uncommon gift where I could combine the impacts of processing, so the mechanical, rheological, chemical, with the actual impact on the formulation and the ingredients and the chemistry side of things to establish an actual product with attributes. That came naturally to me. So what that means is, and that's technical mumbo jumbo to some extent, but what it means is that when I met my second love in life, my wife, at grad school, I was able to follow her out to the East Coast and work for Campbell Soup because, frankly, the my at the time fiance's father's parishioner, her son was the director at Campbell Soup who got me the interview with the director that ended up hiring me. So
It's crazy. So like all these weird little connections, one thing led to the next. But you obviously put yourself in that position, right? You obviously had some of the credentials already to make it even worth their while to make that ask on your behalf.
And so when I came in, I got to have my real experience of what it was like to be a process developer at a large food company. It meant that I went through and got a chance to learn hands-on with large equipment about what some of this stuff does and how we've solved different scaling challenges and things like that. That becomes valuable later on as I start working with smaller groups and say, this is where you're headed. I know because I've literally been there, right? So I worked for Campbell Soup for 2 years, and then I followed my wife, who then graduated from grad school at Princeton and moved us across the country to the Bay Area, and worked for Del Monte for 7.5 years, where I was frankly brought on to be the legacy to take over the engineering department. Wow. And I say that because I was the youngest engineer by about 24 years. So
that's a big deal to come in. I mean, any organization in general, whether you're old and gray haired or younger and everything else, it's a big deal to come into an org and be like, I'm here to take over and change things. And then to come into someone who's 24 years younger, than everyone else. That must have been disruptive.
Well, they
obviously.
obviously put me through my paces and, make me take the worst assignments that they could come up with. At some point, I had 24 concurrent capital projects, which was insane to manage. But I proved what I could do, and eventually a project came along, and it was to top secret project, so I couldn't have a whole lot of help on it. But it was to build a plant in about 18 months in North Carolina. It ended up costing $17.5 million. It is functional today, as far as I know.
Wow.
And it was for a product that, frankly, none of us on the phone knew what it was when we started, which was hilarious. But no, along the way.
Now, I wonder what's the product nowadays?
It's
right?
So it's actually a feedstock for. At the time, it would have gone to Big Heart Pet Brands. I don't know if they've opened it up since then, but Big Heart Pet Brands was the one that was owned by Del Monte before they split off and went to Smucker's, I believe. But anyway, Big Heart Pet, the base for all grain-free dog food, most grain-free dog food, is sweet potatoes. And so what this was is a way to convert sweet potatoes that were excess coming out of the ground, let's say, not the ones that you would find in a grocery store, the sort outs, but convert those into pellets so that's a more dense way of shipping things around. It's not as dusty and things like that as just dried sweet potatoes. Anyway, so it was a pellet conversion plant. So they sort everything out that they shouldn't put in a dog. So they cut off all the black pieces and everything like that. So it's still edible. It's just wouldn't be in a grocery store. And then dice it up and make it into pellets. So,
very cool.
Yeah. So,
okay, so put you in charge of this project. You're super young. Put you in charge of this project. You have the whole engineering department of like probably what Fortune 500 company. I'm guessing is Del Monte or pretty big company.
It used to be a Fortune 500 company years and years and years ago before they started splitting it up. Long story.
But so still big deal job and role. Mm-hmm. You were there for, I'm looking at 7.5 years. So you did well. What made you decide to leave that? Right. I'm sure at that point you're married, all these other things, life's coming up. You're making a great salary. It's pretty secure.
So I actually had my son's birthday is coming up here at the point of recording. So
happy almost birthday.
Yep. But we had just had my son, and that was about the same time that Del Monte was acquired. And through the acquisition, they needed to, now this is getting a little deep, but long story short is they had to cut a lot of money from the expenditure budget, which included headcount. They were going to let one of my colleagues go who was 63, they had moved all over the country. And turned to my director and I said, I don't think this is the right move for you guys. He doesn't have anywhere else he can go, and you're going to shortchange his benefits. I have more options. So, Headhunter's been calling for a while. Impossible Foods have been calling for a good long time, but it was 2.5 hours away, so I wasn't going to do that trip every day. I said, listen, I can jump out, right? So I did. That was enough to save their budget. They were able to keep him around. He's now fully retired with full benefits.
By the way, did he even know you did that, or he know you left and they weren't like
I'm sure he suspected. We never had a one-on-one conversation about it. But he was very intelligent.
Right there. So noble, and already that's already a legacy that you should be so proud of. To be willing to do that, that's not easy for people to do.
Yeah, but you don't do it for the credit, right? You do it because it's right.
Of course. Yeah. But just knowing that in your heart, I know you didn't even want to do it for the credit, but that's leaving a legacy that he may never know about, and that's okay. But the fact that you did that says so much about you and your character, and it's something that we all should learn from for being a good person, is taking that into account. Because it's very easy for all of us to be me. I'm going to focus on that. And you could have said, I'm going to keep my job, and then I'll get a nice payout when they'll lay me off. I'll probably get a lot of cash because they're going to fire me and give me really good severance. And I'll get paid twice.
They were going to keep me around for the next 30 years. Like there was a whole legacy plan of everyone else in the department retiring in the order, and the department would be mine. But yeah,
yes,
that's.
But then it could have been you, right? So then it might have been you in 15 years. The next young guy comes along, and then it would have been you. So just wow, I'm very impressed, Jamie. Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, this is before being your authentic self was even a term, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we used to call it, just ethics, right? Being okay with yourself to go to sleep at night. That's I think if you've got that in your heart, most things, while it will take longer, will pay off in the long run. So, from Del Monte, I was picked up by Just. They were Hampton Creek at the time. They maxed out at somewhere around 140 SKUs because remember they used to make mayonnaise and salad dressing.
That was their first thing, was the mayo. Right. Weren't they making it in San Francisco, if I recall reading about them at the time? And like Bill Gates put a ton of money in, and I mean, this is off my memory, but like, does that sound about right?
Yeah, I don't know about Gates, but yeah, a lot of people put a lot of money in there. And so and it got moved to a contract manufacturer. And so I was brought in to, honestly, they didn't know what a food engineer was. They told me so in my interview.
That's a little worrisome if they're engineering food.
Well,
but anyway.
Then I looked at their job description. I was like, guys, you're representing like 10% of what food engineers are capable of. So I rewrote their job description for them. And they had a few more people they were interviewing. And then eventually they hired me on to fill that role.
Of course, that tends to happen. Yeah. That's also showing a level of initiative that is so critical. I think all the best entrepreneurs I know are just like, this is broken. I'm going to go fix this for you. I'm not going to ask for compensation for it. I'm not going to ask for anything. I'm just going to go do it because this is broken and I can fix it. And great entrepreneurs always are the people who raise their hand to go do it.
But they absolutely could have taken my suggestions and thrown them in the trash, right? Like I have to be okay with that when I'm sending them like free support, because that may realistically what they need to do. There could be political reasons for the reason why they wrote it the way they did. I don't care. But the point was they were not going to get the job done if they only filled that role. So I was more interested in like, okay, you guys might have something here, kind of curious to see where it leads, but either way, this is what you need to do in order to be more successful. So something that comes up again when we get to Catapult. But yeah, I came on to Just shortly afterwards, proved that I knew what I was doing, brought on a small team to continue doing what I was doing, which was helpful to the organization. Eventually we kept looking for where the problems were coming from that we were dealing with. About that time, we tried to partner with operations, but then all of those seats were then vacant.
What does that mean when you say partner with operations? What do you mean?
We tried to work with them to make sure that the decisions being made by the operations team were informed by knowledge of food and how food works.
So you're talking those are things like where to manufacture it, how to ship it, how to make sure it's stored properly, get it into a store shelf, doesn't go bad. End to end.
Those type of things. Yeah. So we ended up, my team ended up accidentally taking over operations. And
accidentally, but once again, this is a key theme that I keep coming back to with every great entrepreneur. Once again, you can be a great entrepreneur internally in a company too, which you did frankly at a lot of these companies. Is you saw something that's broken, you called it out. I'm sure in a politically nice way, but called it out. And as much as possible. And you weren't getting fired, right? You were clearly right, at least about things you were calling out and calling it out. And then offering to fix it. And then next thing you know, you're fixing it, but you're also not taking on that entire project because you raised your hand.
Exactly. And I do the same thing to my team when they raise their hand and say, hey, let's do this. I'm like, that's great. You have a passion about this. You have an interest in this enough to be able to build a plan for how to go about it. I can think of no one better to make sure that it executes according to plan, right?
To riff on that for 2 seconds, because I had a similar conversation this morning with some people on my team. does that scare people too? Like, so my worry is when I say that to people, there's some people who say, well, I'm never going to make a suggestion again because I don't want to hear that from the CEO asking me to do that. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut.
An owner of a company, whether that is, from a share perspective or just from a philosophical perspective, an owner of a company will always speak up when they see a better way to do something.
Hmm?
Now, that better way to do something may not align with the overall strategy for a whole initiative, which is fine,
Absolutely.
but you always want them to speak up, say why they think it's better, and then if it doesn't fit in the overall strategy, discuss why, right? So I had a debate this morning with somebody on my team, um, who mentioned that we should run meetings a certain way, and I pointed out to him that what he wanted to do was go back to a way that we used to do it, and the way that we used to do it actually ran afoul of some regulations. And
Mhm.
so we were not going to go back to that way of doing it, but maybe there was a way to adapt what the driving sentiment for what we used to have versus what we now have in order to try to bring that back into line with where we move forward to, right? So taking the core drive of something's broken, okay, let's listen to what's broken, how they want to fix it. Well, the way they want to fix it doesn't work. That doesn't mean it's not still broken, right? Maybe you
Right.
take what they've proposed and build off of that into something completely new and roll that in. That gives them the empowerment to bring the next thing up, right?
So is that sort of how you make sure you keep that kind of owner? I'll call it like an ownership mentality within the company. Is like at Catapult. Is that because of listening to people, taking action, and then explaining the whys for why you do or don't even maybe take that action? Because I think having an ownership mentality within a culture is so important for a successful business. But is that part of it, or what do you do to keep that mentality?
An ownership mentality is so hard to build, because
Because not everyone can be an owner. I mean, that's part of the problem is you don't always want, if everyone's raising their hand, always trying to get things fixed, you have, I don't know what's the right term, like, a ton of generals and no soldiers or something is the bad version of that example. But
yeah, but it is an appropriate way of the counterpoint to all this. So an owner of the company knows not just, what the company does, but what their role is in it, right? And why
mm,
their role is important to all their coworkers around them. If I sit in regulatory, my job is one way to view regulatory is their job is to say no, but that's
mm-hmm,
not their job. Their job is to make sure you don't get sued, because getting sued
yep,
slows everybody down because now half the company is dedicated towards trying to deal with that lawsuit, right? So regulatory is really there to make sure that we nip some of the problems in the bud. And if we need to kind of redevelop some things to work around some regulations so that we actually comply with federal law, then we should do that, right?
yep,
So that is the translation to reality about what could be done to what should be done and how it should be done, right? So
mm,
um, I think one of the things that I think a lot of us forget about is that every organization evolves over time, and it evolves over time in different ways, right? So when you're building your organization to begin with, it's commonly you with the vision, right? A vision's
yep,
great, but it doesn't mean anything without strategies. Great. So we put a couple
mm,
strategies in place. We measure against those things with KPIs based on tactical movements that we make in order to execute those strategies, blah, 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 right? In other words, you start off with you add some people, they're all going to look to you for your vision. You need to communicate all the moving parts of your vision and be able to take the logical tests that they're going to do to your vision and be able to respond to those with, actually, I didn't think about that, or actually, I've thought about that, and here's what I think about this, and here's why I think about this. And they're going to say, well, why do you think that about that? Well, let's go one level deeper, right? So you have to explain your entire business founding philosophy to your first group of folks. Those group of
yep,
folks will build what is effectively a hub and spoke model, right? Where you are the center of the universe and everything has to go through you, which is
yep,
fine for maintaining the vision, but it becomes burdensome as you scale, right?
course. And you can never take, I mean, I know in your LinkedIn, you talk about how you took a 9-day vacation in your RV, things like that. And clearly you've broken that hub and spoke model to some extent in a good way. But like, how did you get there? Because for a lot of entrepreneurs, you get stuck in that where you are that center of things and you can't ever leave.
Yep. And so your business is limited by you. So in order to delimit by you is you make sure that others are following you around and you intentionally carve off some elements and hand it to them. So you take off some of your hats. The easiest one that most people try to do is bookkeeping, right? All right, let's take off the bookkeeping hat and hand it to somebody. That's a great first step, right? So you can go to a consultant, you can use a tool, you can use all sorts of things. Not that I'm plugging things for you or anything like that, but it is intentional around where is your most valuable time. If you are not an accountant, don't do the accounting, right? Now, there's some things you have to do, like, provide vision for the company about what it is you actually accomplish every day. Sure, you're not going to carve that off, but you can spend more time on that to make sure it's focused and intentional, the more hats you can remove. So,
so how do you keep breaking that down, right? Go 10x further, right? What is the natural end to that, right? So obviously your company, Catapult, and Levy, my company, we're both focused on, hey, let's take stuff that isn't core off of people's plates. But a question I think a lot of founders have and entrepreneurs, because I totally agree with the whole thesis. Like a good entrepreneur, at least I think what your thesis is, a good entrepreneur is one who removes all the things that they're not great at from either themselves or also from their company because it's not your core competency. And you should only do things that are your core competency.
Yep.
But how far can that road run before it breaks?
Well, does Nestle maintain outside counsel?
Yes, but they also have in-house general counsel too.
Yes, because they need to filter what the entire organization is doing through their general counsel to outside counsel to get it done. Their general counsel, for the most part, is just for dealing with the organization and being the gatekeeper to know when to engage the outside counsel, right?
Great way of putting it. I mean, and same thing I assume with they would say for their financial. They have an internal financial team, but they also have outside auditors.
Absolutely, because they need to know how they can continuously improve as well, right? So Nestle, being the largest food company in the world, still uses outside folks. They do have internal folks who manage those outside folks, which is the nature of all outside folks to begin with. You have to manage them to some level, right? But they are the epitome of, okay, well, how far does this scale? It scales. It scales all the way out. My suggestion is get out of that hub and spoke model as quickly as possible and build that web so that your team members are leaning on each other and they are in turn leaning on other people and not necessarily using you as the center of the universe, but gut checking themselves on tactical decisions that they've made or strategies that they may be changing over time because of what they're seeing on the ground. You want to make sure that they're reporting back to you so that if there's any impacted strategies across the other side of the organization, you can make sure that you're communicating that back to them, right? So you steer the company by basically steering the high level of what's going on rather than the minutia, right? So everyone agrees that you, as the founder, you're going to start off doing the minutia, and you are going to get out of that, right?
Yep.
Same philosophy, no matter how you look at which department or everything along the way. Like this is all going to be something that scales, and you have to realize that your organization will evolve out of the web structure as well, right? So a web structure is very scrummy, right? Very scrummy. That's kind of the principle of a scrum, right? But necessarily it will evolve out of that as you require deep technical expertise in a certain area. You'll switch to something that's pseudo-departmental, right?
Yep.
Where you have to have those core competencies. The entirety of R&D can't live in one person. It now has to live in 3 or 4 people because that's how much R&D you have, right? So
then how do you keep doing that then for an org, right? And when did those switch? So 2 questions. How do you do that for an org, right? Like all this makes sense philosophically, but I think it's really difficult for a lot of founders to build that strength themselves. One, to give stuff, actually a few things. One is just to be willing to give it up. There's a whole ego piece. There's a trust component. There's no one's going to be doing it as better. I mean, this ego maybe, but like as good as the founder. And like, I can't, no one's going to be able to do it. And every time I hire, or I know plenty of founders who they hire someone for a role, they fire that person 6 months later because that person doesn't meet their standards, which are probably impossible.
So here, I think I take a different philosophy here. No one's going to meet my standard because I literally came up with the standard, right?
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So that's fine. I am the best person at talking, outside the company about what the company does. I am, and I will always be. But that doesn't mean that
You might not always be. I'm not actually convinced that's always the case, but certainly for a long time to come, you will be. But anyways.
There's a limiting factor on scalability of being the only one talking outside the company. So the question is it worth it to spend some time with your team, to empower 3 other people, to also be able to speak about the company, maybe at a 75%-ish value level of what you can add, or which will scale over time to 85, 90%, as well as empower them to come up with new ideas about how to improve the company because they're in different markets listening to different inputs in these discussions. Like all of this actually, it's a question of empowerment, right? It's not a matter of trust, so to speak. It's a matter.
How do you break those two up then? Like what's the difference between empowerment and trust? Because I feel like I would say those go hand in hand.
So trust is something that can be lost. Empowerment is something that's invested in, right? So it's a matter of how you think about it. It's you come in, I trust you 100%, and over time, I will lose that trust in you and somehow, right? That is one way of looking at trust. It can come back up, it can go back down, but it's always this sliding scale. Empowerment is you're starting at 0, right? And I'm adding to you based off of your experiences and leveraging your skills and providing you the best place of where you can be you. And sometimes that means that your best you, is going to be outside the company, right? Sometimes you have to go outside the company to continue to grow. But all of us in this industry are here to grow, right? We're always looking for new challenges, new skills to build, and things like that. So part of it is also everybody I work with, they've got 15 years experience by definition, right? So we don't work with anybody right out of school, not because we don't trust them, but because my clients don't want to pay somebody right out of school to help them. They want someone who's been there already. So I have a slightly different situation for a lot of folks that are coming straight out of MBA school, for example, right? You know very much on how to analyze a business, which is great. There's a lot of business analysts out there. So you need to do something slightly different than that and then build a team around that have different skill sets than you do in order to kind of build yourself up. The only way you get to be on top of an organization is you build one underneath you, right? You don't start off on top of an organization and then, just like have everybody fall in. You have to start at the ground level. We all do. And then you slowly build yourself up by putting things underneath you that work to continue the organization's growth and movement forward.
So should a founder, when you're building that organization, should a founder do every one of those jobs before they can actually manage and hire properly for it? I mean, or they're jobs that you can't or shouldn't do?
I think to make sure that you're hiring the right person, I don't know that you need to do the job. You need to research it. It means you need to talk to people who do the job.
Yep.
And you need to talk to them about what's necessary for the job. Because let's take an example of, online marketing, right? I know nothing about that whatsoever.
Yep.
Before I go and interview any group, first thing I'm going to go do is learn their nomenclature, right? Learn, be able to speak their lexicon, or else they're going to talk circles around me, and I'm not going to know which way's up at the end. Not because that's their intent, but because I lack the physical, and I'm ignorant in that space, right?
Yep.
So I'm easily confused and not understanding what people are pitching to me. So
I do think, by the way, that's an unfortunate part of a lot of salespeople's tactics, though, is that the person they're talking to or selling to, in some cases, don't know all the details, right? I mean, that's speaking of food, of course, in your world. Lots of food packaging is it is meant to deceive in some cases. Maybe not all of it, but like there's plenty of food packaging that's meant to deceive because it wants to sell you on. I think I read an article recently about how, it said this was like olive oil margarine or something, and it turned out that it was like 1% olive oil or something, and it was actually mostly just like vegetable oil and bad for you. It was meant to sell sort of the health benefits, and I think now there's a lawsuit about it. But anyway, but it's those sort. I mean, that's bad sales, but a lot of sales can be that way because the average consumer isn't that knowledgeable. And this doesn't mean just in the space of time about marketing. Well, there's a lot of founders who know nothing about marketing. They're going to go talk to a lot of marketing agencies, and those agencies are going to all tell them all different things about how wonderful they are. Mm-hmm. They're going to spend lots and lots of money over a few months and then get very few results after that cash has been spent.
So I will tell you that the right partners, if you tell them, I don't understand what you just said, mm-hmm. if they are willing to explain it to you in a way that you understand, that's likely a good partner.
Great.
So
how many entrepreneurs do you know that say like, I don't, that's also an ego thing to mm-hmm. say, I don't get it. Mm-hmm. How willing are the people who are the best entrepreneurs to say, I don't understand, and like subsume their ego that way and admit they don't get it?
I'd say in the food industry, probably about half, honestly. It's a much higher percentage than you might expect because I end up having to sit down with them. So like, I like to test people's knowledge on purpose mm-hmm. when I hop on a call with them because I want to understand where they're coming from. If I understand where they're coming from, then I know what the right solution looks like for them. And that's not so much a sales job. It's just like, hey, here's what the answer looks like. You can do it with us. You can do it with somebody else. Like there's a lot of different solutions out there. But here's what I see as the right path forward to you based on the business logic you gave me, right? So I get questions about, well, why can't I make let's go with raw water, right? Why can't water be raw? Well, there are pathogens. What's a pathogen? Those microbes that make you sick, like COVID, those are pathogens. They live in water. And if you don't kill them, then they make you sick, right? Mm-hmm. So pausing the sales pitch long enough to have that discussion to make sure that they understand what it is that you said is important from not just a sales technique, but just being a good person, in my opinion. Yeah. Like we know none of us start with the same set of common knowledge and experiences. And if we assume that, and we assume that nobody can come at us without that level of knowledge and experience, then we're always just going to have this echo chamber of non-innovation. Right?
Yep. Although then that gets another question or sort of pet peeve of mine is how many entrepreneurs do you know, or at least really good ones, who have what you're sort of describing to me is this idea of someone who is incredibly curious, like almost a curiosity mindset. Mm-hmm. They want to learn. That's almost part of the joy. Yeah. Like why am I doing this? Why do I do this podcast and this interview series? Well, sure, it might be helpful for Levy in my business, but actually a large part of it and why I enjoy it and hopefully I'm somewhat decent at it, I'm learning a lot from you. Like this is fun for me. Like I'm actually learning a bunch about what makes people great in why they get to do the stuff they do, and hopefully makes me a better entrepreneur mm-hmm. as well. And so I enjoy that. So for me, it's about curiosity. Like that's my goal in life. It's continuous learning. But have you seen that same thing with other entrepreneurs and maybe even people on your team who are sort of being an entrepreneur for their career?
Yeah, I would say because I come from a technical side of things, continuous learning is the sign of a good person to hire and work with and things like that, because they will always look to add to themselves, right?
Yep.
And when you run a company, it's very challenging in some cases to find sources of learning, right? Which is also an interesting discussion off to the side. But, it is important, in my opinion, to continuously learn because the market is continuously changing. The market is continuously changing because the world continues to spin. So if change is not built into your model and thinking and way of being, then you may find a really great solution that doesn't matter a week from now, right? Yeah. So that's why I like working with continuous learners. It's why I make sure that people are actively passionate about where they're at, because it will drive the continuous learning to be better at what they're at. So when you say entrepreneurs for their career, career is a loaded term that implies the entirety of their working time frame and the legacy that they leave behind associated with it. So, a career is meant to build towards something, right? And so I think you're exactly right. You can never be a CEO or head of anything and still have a highly rewarding career that does things and makes changes, right? And a career, yes, it is inclusive of what you do for a living, for work. But I think we commonly leave off the other half of career, which is, what do you do when you're not at work?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of folks out there that do nonprofit work. There's a lot of folks that do community service work. All of those things are part of our career because they leave behind a legacy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, well, on that note, I mean, that's actually an interesting point too. Well, question for you is like, one, what are those outside of work things that you do? And I'll give you a counterpoint before you answer, which is, I also have a bit of a thesis that may be wrong, which is, as a really good entrepreneur, you need to spend a lot of time focusing. And that's a big part of what makes for success, is working hard at something, focusing on it, becoming an expert. And it takes time, years to get there, to build a successful sort of business. And in most, we see the super fast ones that blow up and explode and go really fast, but the large majority are not like that. And so for me personally, I actually don't have a lot of time in my life for things outside of it. I basically have Levy, my company, and family. And if I'm lucky, I maybe get to go to dinners with some friends here and there once in a while. And that's about all I have in time for in my life right now. Maybe to my detriment. That someday might be real problematic if I don't have any hobbies or the things that I'm doing. But what do you see for yourself personally are those things outside of work? And what do you see with other great entrepreneurs? Because yes, I totally agree. There are many things that are part of your legacy. I just don't happen to have time for anything except for those two things that are going to be really big parts of my legacy. My company and my family. My children are a big part of my legacy too.
Yeah, so I'm also my son's Cub Master for his pack, for Scouts. I also teach a couple classes over at Mount Mary, which is a local community college. I teach food processing and food engineering. I also run. I'm a dungeon master for my D&D game,
Awesome.
which is, frankly, I need the right brain balance, because while yes, focus is important, balance, having a macroscopic perspective of where that focus exists and knowing how to set it aside is important for keeping yourself balanced and not burning out. I think what we find with a lot of entrepreneurs is by the time they get to 30, 32 years of age, they've burned out on being an entrepreneur and they just kind of go do whatever, right?
Yeah. I have a lot of, I've been in Silicon Valley for 13 years now, and I've seen a large percentage of the people who I kind of came in with, my cohort, are all gone off doing, I don't even know what in many cases, and sort of just, they did burn out. What do you think, speaking of that, right? What did you do differently? Is it because you have these other hobbies? Is it because you spent almost 12 years working at sort of bigger companies and were more established, that when you decided to found Catapult later in life, you were more prepared for it? What were the things that led you to be ready to be a great entrepreneur and build that sort of support, internal and external support system to enable you to run this long journey that you jumped onto?
Yeah. So I have a couple of advantages. One is I have the experience in the industry that this industry is not going to throw me for a loop, right? I'm not going to learn something that's going to break my entire business model tomorrow, right?
Yep.
I have spent my 12 years. I spent all of those years building networks. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. But when I decided to pivot and do what I decided to do, I literally had several hundred people that I individually emailed my website to and said, hey, I'm looking to do this. Can you tell me what you think about what it is I want to do? Right? Which is a great head start, because now I'm not just talking to my network, right? my network is now talking to their networks.
Yep.
Because they know me. They've worked with me for several years. They know, where my heart's at. I don't have to define that for them. I don't have to convince them that I'm not trying to steal their money. Like there's not cold calling. Cold calling, especially in consulting, is useless, right?
Yeah.
What in the world can I possibly do to convince you to even read past the first sentence? There's nothing. Nothing, right? I don't care if it's focused, targeted, geofenced, blah, blah, blah. It's an ad. Scroll, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. I'm not going to find people that way.
Yep. Do you think, this is a great point, and I've heard this from a bunch of other people too, is it is actually, the networks are actually really important for so many people in their careers. But what a lot of people probably don't recognize or remember is it takes maybe not a lifetime, but a lot of a lifetime to build up a network where people can trust you. And for me, same boat. I've been doing this for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I was a dumb little shit basically 13 years ago. Didn't know a lot, probably was overly cocky and confident about what I did know. But didn't burn a lot of bridges, I hope, and created some really good networks of people that I'm now able to call on as I'm building up my company and I'm building up this podcast and other things that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
That enables all that to happen. And so it is, so in a sense, right, Catapult today is not just a company that started, I forget what, 3 years ago or so. It's actually a company 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a company that started 20 years ago almost, when you started your first job, basically.
Yep. Just 5 years ago, I put my name on it. Right.
Yep.
That's the last thing, is that because I had all those years of experience, I knew the framework of the industry and where the gaps were, right? Not only did I know where they were, I had experienced what had happened because there were those gaps in the industry.
Yep.
Right? So I had a business model that wrote itself out of my own experience. Right?
Yeah.
Here's my marketing plan, here's the people I contact, here's how my financials work, here's how, like, all of this. It was just a matter of like, okay, well, I got to do the work to step through the door, right? It wasn't even something I needed to fully write up because I had done all the research. I had lived all the research, right?
Yep.
It was simply executing and testing and adjusting as we go.
So jumping into that really quickly, because I want to spend some time there. We're actually going way already. Like we're getting close on time already, which is dangerous because I have a bunch more questions I want to ask. But tell us more about Catapult Services. Why did you think there was a real opportunity in the market? Why did you think this is something you're going to go leave your sort of steady jobs where other people are paying you money to take these risks and start your own business? It's scary. It costs money. You have a family now, all these other things, and you're going to go jump off and go do something new. What made you decide that was a worthy use of time, energy, and risk to you and your family?
Couple of
sorry. Package probably all good. It's fine. They'll leave it outside. It's all good.
No worries. All right. So couple of moving parts that kind of drive into all that. One is over the last 15 to 20 years, large food companies have been clearing their technical ladders. So we were always promised in undergrad that there were these technical ladders that you could go up versus the managerial ladder, and that they were parallel and equal. Well, it's no longer the case coming out of the early 2000s. They've been clear cutting them because they're a cost center, not a profit center, right? Mm-hmm. R&D is a cost center by definition because you're building for non-quarterly results.
Yeah,
fine. Because of that, coupled with the World Health Organization putting out, I believe it was in 2009, that by 2050, we're going to run out of the ability to feed everybody on the planet.
Although they've been saying that that's been something that's what Malthus or whatever has been saying, that, that people have been saying we're going to run out of food for forever, right? And there's some green new revolution every time.
We've always gotten past those hurdles because of innovation. So densification of crops, industrialization of agriculture, yada, 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 right? So there's a lot of ways that we've gotten past it. But World Health Organization said with where we're at today, we've got a problem and it's on the horizon about the same time that they're removing all their ability to innovate, right? So investors get wind of this and say, hey, opportunity. If we know we're going to innovate our way out of it and it's not going to be with these existing large companies, then it's got to be with a small company or several small companies. thus the bloom of all the startups in the food area, because the funds were established to go after it, which led to more startups. Those startups led to some success, which led to more funds being developed, and back and forth we go, right? That has gotten us to where we're at today, where it's much, much easier to start a food company today. That said, neither the investors or most of the time the entrepreneurs understand the first thing about the framework of how the food industry works in the US. Can't speak.
Just going back to what you saw at Hampton Creek to some extent, where you're saying like the operation side, where they didn't actually know they were good maybe food scientists, but didn't actually understand the operation side.
It was more that they hired people from the operations side of Netflix,
Okay,
and didn't understand what shelf life was and why that's important,
got it.
which led to a couple.
But is that the same to the people you're talking to today? Is it a sort of similar idea? They have a great idea. I want to go create, a water product, but there's actually all these other areas, and maybe there's a good market for that type of water, but there are a lot of elements that need to be thought through to bring something actually to market.
So one of the restrictions that we have with bringing something to market is it has to be safe. You can make stuff in your kitchen that is fine to eat today, but 2 weeks from now, you wouldn't want to touch it, right? Because of our distribution systems and how big the US is, frankly, that drives us to having to have longer shelf lives, which means that it has to be stabilized and safe.
Yep.
It's not that anybody's out to get you. It's just these are the best solutions we've gotten to date because we haven't had the investment in the innovation to drive new solutions. Now that we've got the investment for innovation, what we've got to do is make sure that all this innovation gets focused and engages with the rest of the industry. There's the gap. The gap is very simple to define. All these people wanting to drive innovation and having the money to do so, and not having the skills, networks, or engagement with the rest of the industry to tap into the tools and resources that they have already to make it happen. So I have the network in the industry. I spent some time in the startup realm. I have access to where these entrepreneurs tend to group together because by definition, for whatever reason, entrepreneurs tend to group together.
They do. Hence why a lot of people are in San Francisco right now.
Yep. They share resources, right? Or commiserate. There's a lot of different beneficial things that they get from working together. But what that means is there's no one carrying them from where they're at today of a lack of knowledge and engagement to that level. That's Catapult.
Yep.
Catapult is literally meant to build that bridge. It is not.
You're catapulting them to the next step, in a sense.
The metaphor works on so many levels. It's a nerd's paradise, absolutely.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, getting that engagement is going to drive that innovation into the rest of the industry, which will get us past 2050. Tom Vilsack, I sat down, is Secretary of Agriculture. Sat down with him a little over a year ago, and said, "Hey, what do you think the innovation pipeline is for getting us to 2050?" He's like, it's not one innovation, it's not hundreds of innovations, it's tens of thousands of micro innovations that we get all across the country, all around the world, that drive us to understanding our engagement with our food and our environment better, to allow us to scale to a new carrying capacity of the earth. That's the only way to do it, or else we're going to have massive wars and starvation.
Yes. The moment, I think there's lots of examples already when food security, when food becomes scarce and people have hungry bellies, people very quickly start acting irrationally. I mean, I see this with, not to throw my wife under the bus, I see it when she gets a little hungry sometimes too. In myself included, when you get a little hungry, you start acting irrationally. That's on a super small scale, let alone a society running out of food.
Yeah, exactly.
I can only imagine. So walk me through. So given time stuff. So, okay, you said, "Hey, I want to go start Catapult Services. There's an opportunity in the market today." Great. You were in Silicon Valley for forever. You move to the middle of the country to go start this company, or maybe not to go start it, but you moved to the middle of the country
and started this company.
Why did you do that? Leaving the innovation capital of the world in sort of San Francisco and the Bay Area to go somewhere completely different. And then number two, did you take funding to do that? And like, how do you compare and contrast those? Well, just start. How do you compare and contrast the mentalities of these two places, and why did you make a decision to go almost the opposite direction of what every other entrepreneur does?
Well, honestly, the Bay Area is not that great for making food. Um, the costs of everything there are astronomical, um,
Yep.
and without the, let's say, steady income of um, we couldn't afford to live in the Bay Area anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, with my son being 2 years old, we moved out here where I can actually get a yard,
Yep.
and I can actually take him on a bike down the street and let him, just roam around the neighborhood, right, with a pack of his friends. It's an intentional decision about how I want to raise my child,
I love that.
because at the end of the day, my son's going to be 35 in 2050. If I don't solve 2050, my son will face starvation. Not from himself. He'll be fine. He's a white male. He'll be just fine. But he will face starvation on the planet and have to deal with the ethical ramifications of what my generation has failed to do in solving this issue for him. Right?
Yeah. So that's your legacy, is how do I solve this for
Right.
all humans on the entire planet?
I can't solve the environment. I can't solve politics. I can't solve a lot of different things. But food's actually something where I'm in a position to draw enough connections and bridges and build enough programs and pipelines that my son will not have to deal with the threat of 2050. Now, I'm sure we'll kick it down the road to 2080 or something like that. That's no longer my problem, right? The
Yeah.
hope is that innovation pipeline continues to churn and we continue to change and evolve as a society to be able to get, that rolling threshold moved out further, right?
Yeah.
I can't help with all that, but 2050 is a personal mission for me. Um, and so, you know, it's driving that legacy.
So you made that choice to move out to the Midwest
Yeah.
for family purposes in some ways, and what's going to cost just for building a company. But what did you miss out on, or what do you think you lost by moving there, if anything? Like, is there, if other entrepreneurs, or once again, sort of more venture backed type entrepreneurs, as entrepreneurs everywhere, want to follow your path, what are the questions they should be asking or considering?
Honestly, if people want to follow my path, I'd say put in your time. Go
Mm-hmm.
learn an industry that you are passionate about. Find the industry that you are passionate about. Go work for someone else so you can see what they're doing wrong. Also, so you
Yep.
can see what they're doing right. Challenge those best practices. Understand why that's the local optimum for what they've decided, and then decide for you whether or not that's the global optimum, right?
Yep.
If it's not the global optimum, then you have to start to rebalance all the moving parts, all the variables to find that new global optimum, and then that's something you can pursue, right? But if you don't know the industry, you are it's like throwing water against a wall. It's great that the wall doesn't care, right?
Totally. So what do you tell that to people though, who are people in today's society have a lot of impatience? I mean, I do even myself. I think I'm a relatively patient person, but like, man, I still flick through things kind of quickly on my phone sometimes and don't really spend any time reading things in some cases.
Mhm.
What do you tell the people on your team who are probably impatient? Do you tell the young person coming out of school, well, I'm impatient. I want to move faster.
You can move faster by leveraging the experience of others
Hmm.
and by leveraging the systems that are built for you. But you can't change the system without learning the system.
Hmm.
And I realize that some individuals that I've worked for in the past don't believe that you have to break the system first. But again, it's water against a wall. No one
Yeah. No.
cares.
I hate it when people come in, if you get a consultant or even a new senior person, they come in and say, we need to change everything. And I say, you don't even understand why we're doing things the way we are today. You can't go change it all until you actually understand it.
I think that is a function of not listening before you speak. That's my personal opinion on it. And I think listening actually educates us, and that continuous learner will listen.
Yep.
Right. And if they're willing to listen, this is kind of a litmus test that I give for my clients as well. If they're willing to listen, then I'm willing to work with them. Right. If they're not willing to listen, I don't know why we're having this conversation. Right.
Yeah. Although is that difficult, because some of the people you're working with, a lot of founders have very strong personalities.
Yeah.
Because they're willing to do something totally insane, which is they're going to go start some company, and they maybe don't want to listen because they so believe they have a reality distortion field.
I love that energy. That energy is what we need. With that energy should be very well focused into the right solutions. And I think we spend a lot of that energy going down the wrong solutions that just frankly don't work.
Yep.
And
so just save everyone time.
Yeah. So I've honestly, there's sometimes I get pitched things in introductory calls, and I tell them, doesn't work. It literally just doesn't work. What you're trying to do is not technically feasible. And sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't.
Yep.
If they listen, I say, okay, let's look at what is feasible, right? This and this and this and this. By the way, this group is already doing that. They're actually looking for some help if you'd like to help them out. Maybe you could drive all that energy directly into another organization that's trying to do this already. You don't need to be different. If this is your passion and this is going to be your legacy, who cares who's at the helm, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If the credit doesn't matter, because in the food industry it really doesn't. If the credit doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter who you work for to get the job done.
And the credit also, I would say, I mean, the way you're describing it, the credit doesn't matter because it's about the legacy and the impact. And the legacy is about the impact you have, not about your ego getting credit for something. It's about, did I make an impact? And you can make that impact even if you are not at the helm. In some ways, actually, you can probably make more of an impact by not being the person at the helm, because you can actually get a lot done, versus you and I have to get on all these calls all day long and we can't do as much as we maybe want to do.
What if we took 5 entrepreneurs who really wanted to start a company, and we bundled them all together and said, okay, go that way, right? If you pointed them all in the same direction at the same time, they could move mountains, right?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be all about us. It doesn't have to be about, this is the only solution where, organic coffee made into butter sculptures or whatever. Like, this isn't the only solution that's going to get us to 2050, right? It might very well be part of the solution, but we have to acknowledge that there's other forces moving in the same direction, and then help each other out to get there.
Is this a difference between, last 2 questions, is this a difference between a kind of coastal entrepreneur mindset versus what you've seen in the middle of the country? Is there a different mindset at all, or every entrepreneur is the same no matter where they are? There's like, no, we all have the same problems. We all have the same strengths and weaknesses.
No 2 entrepreneurs are the same, period.
Yep. Fair enough.
Exactly. Everyone's got unique challenges, and everyone sees the world differently. And when we can listen to hear how they see the world and fill in any gaps where things might be missing, then we can empower them to go the right direction, right? And that's really what I try to do. I can list off probably 30 names of companies that have called me in this year alone where we didn't actually end up doing business together because I answered all their questions on the introductory call. I'm like, if this is what you need, let me just answer your questions. Don't let me pitch Catapult to you. Let me just answer all your questions, and then you go do the work, right? You've got more time than money. Go do that, right? Like,
they might still come back, or they're going to tell their friends about you too, right? So it builds on itself and compounds.
There is the other balance to doing the right thing. When you do the right thing, they tell people that you're doing the right thing, right? So there is the self-serving aspect to that, but that's not the reason why you do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
But
I tell my team something really similar with the idea that I'm like, look, guys, if we accomplish our mission and goal, which is for us is making every entrepreneur 10x better by having like the best back office. So they have a chance to be the best entrepreneur they can be. We will get rich. I mean, like, sure, that will be an outcome of doing our job really well because we built a fantastic product that makes a massive impact. It has a real legacy, but we're not doing it for the money. If we do it for the money, it will change things in a big way. We're doing it because we believe this is really valuable. And the outcome might be we get really wealthy, but that's not the goal. So one last question for you, which I ask everybody: if there's one piece of advice that every single entrepreneur that you think every entrepreneur should take away from this conversation or from learning about Jamie, what is that, and what would you say?
Listen 3 times more than you speak. We all have really great things to say. And I think that the passion that we feel is just all that energy bottled up, and we have to force it out of our mouth to speak continuously. And there's value to that in getting yourself heard. But if you don't listen first and be strategic about how you speak, it's water against a wall.
Yeah, that is, thank you. I will not even try to follow up with that because I'm for obvious reasons, but also because it's actually really well said. And a critical thing that everyone should learn how to do well is active listening, and then asking curious questions as a follow-up. But Jamie, thank you so much for being, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. 2, how can people get in touch with you? So if people want to talk with you about food stuff or just being a great entrepreneur, where can they find you?
Easiest is LinkedIn because my last name is really hard to spell. But the other way would be to just email me. I'm Jamie at catapultserve.com. That's CATAPULTSCRV.com. Or just come by the website, hang around, see what we're up to. And always happy to take a phone call, chat with folks. But not everything leads to a paying relationship. I just like to hear what people are working on and see what I can do to help.
Yeah. Thank you so much today, Jamie, for everything. Really appreciate it. I learned a ton, and look forward to continuing our conversation as we both learn and grow as entrepreneurs.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.